The heavy iron door of the holding cell slammed shut with a finality that echoed through Daniel's chest. He sat on the cold metal bench, wrists still tingling from the cuffs, staring at the gray concrete walls that smelled of bleach and regret. Just overnight for investigation, the officer had muttered as he locked the door, but Daniel knew the truth. It was because Roman's brother Jake had seen them stealing that one forbidden kiss behind the garage at the family block party in suburban Chicago. One moment of weakness after 2 years of hiding, and now here he was, alone while Roman stood helpless on the porch watching the red and blue lights fade into the night. Daniel closed his eyes and let the memories flood in. He had met Roman at a photography exhibit downtown 2 years earlier. Roman, the sharp-suited corporate lawyer from a conservative family, had lingered by Daniel's prints of Misty Lake, Michigan sunrises longer than anyone else. Their conversation had started with art and ended with coffee that stretched into hours. Roman's laugh was quiet but genuine, his eyes warm despite the walls he kept up. Daniel, openly gay and free with his camera slung over his shoulder, had fallen hard and fast. But Roman had whispered on their third date, "My family. They wouldn't understand. Not yet." So they built a secret life, late-night drives along the lakefront, weekend escapes to a cabin in Wisconsin where no one knew their names, quiet dinners in Daniel's small wicker park apartment. It was enough until it wasn't. The block party had been Roman's idea, a casual bring-a-friend invitation to keep appearances. The backyard was packed with neighbors grilling burgers, kids chasing fireflies, and Roman's parents laughing with Jake and his wife. Daniel had tried to stay in the friend zone, chatting about photography with Roman's mom, but the pull between them was magnetic. When they slipped behind the garage for 30 seconds of stolen closeness, Jake's voice cut through the night like a knife. "What the hell is this?" The shove came first, then the words, slurs Daniel had heard before but never from family. Daniel pushed back to protect himself, and the neighbors called the police. Roman's face in that moment, pale, torn between love and fear, was burned into Daniel's mind now as the hours ticked by in the cell. He paced the small space, replaying every choice. Had he pushed Roman too hard for more openness? Was their love worth the risk of destroying Roman's carefully built life? The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, and Daniel wondered if Roman was sitting at home right now, explaining to his parents that it was all a misunderstanding. The thought hurt more than the bench digging into his back. By the time the night guard slid a tray of cold food under the door, Daniel had made a quiet vow. If he walked out of here tomorrow, he wouldn't ask Roman to choose between him and his family. He would let go if he had to. But deep down, he knew letting go wasn't something either of them could survive. The next morning came with the clang of keys. Daniel stood as the officer unlocked the door. "Judge wants to see you," the man grunted. Daniel's heart hammered. He had no idea that in the next hour everything would change. Not just his freedom, but the fragile world he and Roman had built in secret. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and old coffee as Daniel was let in, still wearing the same rumpled shirt from the party. Roman sat in the back row, dark circles under his eyes, hands clenched in his lap. Their eyes met for a brief second, and Daniel saw the fear there. The same fear that had kept their relationship hidden for 2 years. The judge, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense bun, reviewed the report in silence. Daniel stood straight, trying to look calm even as his mind raced with worst-case scenarios. "Mr. Hayes," the judge said, addressing him by last name, "the charges of disturbing the peace and simple assault are dismissed. The body cam footage and witness statements clearly show this was a case of self-defense against unprovoked hostility. I won't tolerate hate disguised as neighborhood justice in my courtroom." She paused, looking directly at Daniel. "You're free to go." Immediately, the gavel cracked, and just like that, the nightmare ended. Roman stood up slowly, as if he couldn't believe what he'd heard. Daniel walked out of the courtroom into the bright Chicago morning light, the city skyline sharp against a clear blue sky, and Roman was there on the steps waiting. They didn't hug right away, too many eyes, too much habit. Instead, Roman drove them back to Daniel's apartment in silence, the radio playing some forgettable pop song. Once the door closed behind them, Roman finally spoke. "I thought I was going to lose you last night." His voice cracked. Daniel pulled him close then, feeling the tremor in Roman's shoulders. "You almost did. But not the way you think." They sat on the couch for hours, Roman confessing how Jake had already called their parents, how the family group chat was exploding with questions. Roman's mother had cried on the phone, asking if it was true. His father had gone quiet, the worst kind of quiet. That afternoon, the first cracks appeared. Roman's boss at the law firm left a voicemail about office optics after hearing rumors from a colleague who lived in the same suburb. Daniel watched Roman pace the living room, phone in hand, debating whether to call his family back. "I can't keep pretending," Roman said finally, but his eyes showed the terror of what that meant. Daniel wanted to tell him it was okay to wait, to protect his career and his parents, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he made coffee and listened as Roman unpacked years of hiding, the college boyfriend he'd never told anyone about, the therapy sessions he'd paid for in cash, the constant fear that one slip would cost him everything. By evening, they drove to the lakefront to walk along the path where they had first held hands in public after dark. The wind off Lake Michigan was cool, carrying the scent of summer. Daniel took Roman's hand openly for the first time in the city light. "Whatever happens next, we face it together," he said. Roman squeezed back, but Daniel could feel the hesitation, the way Roman glanced over his shoulder. The release from jail had freed Daniel physically, but it had unlocked something deeper in Roman. A storm of guilt, love, and terror that neither of them could ignore. The next few days blurred into a haze of phone calls and quiet arguments. Roman's parents demanded he come home to talk like adults, so they drove out to the suburbs on Saturday. The house smelled of fresh coffee and tension. Roman's mother hugged Daniel stiffly, her eyes red from crying. His father sat at the kitchen table, arms crossed, asking questions that felt like accusations. "How long has this been going on?" Jake stood in the corner, still angry but quieter now that the judge had ruled. Daniel answered honestly, describing how much he loved Roman, how their relationship had nothing to do with the family but everything to do with who Roman really was. The conversation lasted 3 hours and ended with Roman's father saying, "We need time." No yelling, just a heavy silence that followed them back to the car. On the drive home, Roman stared out the window. "They didn't disown me," he said softly, "but they might as well have." Daniel reached over and rested a hand on his knee, feeling the weight of every unsaid word. At work on Monday, Roman's boss pulled him into a meeting. "Clients expect discretion," the man said carefully. "We support diversity, but optics matter." Roman came home that night and cried for the first time in front of Daniel, real, shaking sobs that revealed how much the secrecy had cost him. Meanwhile, Daniel threw himself into his photography, capturing candid shots of the city that somehow all featured couples holding hands openly. A close friend from the art community, a woman named Lena who had known about them from the start, offered her spare room if things got too tense. "You don't have to carry this alone," she told Daniel over coffee. But Daniel refused. He wanted Roman to choose him without ultimatums. The misunderstanding came on Wednesday when Roman suggested they take a break, just until things settle. Daniel felt the betrayal like a punch. A break? After everything. He stormed out and walked the streets until midnight, camera forgotten at home. When he returned, Roman was waiting with takeout and apologies. "I don't want space. I want courage." They talked until dawn, Roman admitting the fear wasn't just about family. It was about losing the version of himself he'd built to survive. By the end of the week, a small betrayal hit harder. A colleague at Roman's firm, someone Daniel had met at a holiday party, leaked the story to a local blog under the guise of community concern. The article was vague, but the damage was done. Roman's phone wouldn't stop ringing. In the midst of it, Daniel suggested they take a weekend trip to the cabin in Wisconsin, the one place where the world couldn't reach them. Roman agreed, and for 2 days they hiked the trails, cooked simple meals, and remembered why they had fallen in love. But even there, Roman checked his phone too often, the weight of Chicago waiting like a shadow. The trip back to the city brought the first real test of sacrifice. Roman's firm offered him a promotion, bigger office, better pay, but with a quiet condition: keep personal matters private. Roman came home furious, pacing the apartment while Daniel cooked pasta. They think they can buy my silence. Daniel set the spoon down. Then don't take it. We can downsize. I can take more freelance gigs. Roman stopped pacing. You'd do that for me? The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. That night they lay awake talking about futures neither had dared imagine. Maybe moving to a smaller city, maybe Roman starting his own practice focused on civil rights. The idea excited Daniel, but he saw the flicker of doubt in Roman's eyes. Giving up the prestige his family had always praised would be another kind of coming out. The following week brought a confrontation at Roman's family Sunday dinner. Jake showed up with an apology that felt forced, but the real blow came when Roman's mother pulled Daniel aside in the kitchen. "We love our son," she said, voice trembling. "But this life, it's not what we pictured." Daniel answered gently, sharing stories of their quiet moments. The way Roman laughed at his bad jokes, the way they supported each other's dreams. By dessert, the mood had softened slightly, but the damage lingered. On the drive home, Roman said, "I think I'm ready to tell the rest of the family." Daniel's heart swelled with pride, yet he worried about the cost. At work the next day, Roman made the choice. He turned down the promotion and quietly updated his LinkedIn to include a photo of the two of them at the lake. Nothing flashy, just honest. The reactions poured in: supportive messages from younger colleagues, awkward silences from others. One senior partner stopped by Roman's desk. "Bold move." Roman smiled for the first time in days. "Necessary move." That evening Daniel surprised him with tickets to a small gallery opening featuring local LGBTQ+ artists. Walking in together, hands linked openly, felt like breathing fresh air after years underwater. But the high didn't last. A mutual friend from Roman's college days reached out with a message that stung. "Heard the news. Hope you're not throwing your career away for a phase." Roman read it aloud, voice tight, and Daniel held him while he processed the betrayal from someone he'd once trusted. The emotional toll showed in small ways. Roman sleeping less, Daniel channeling anxiety into new photo series titled Hidden Light. They argued one night about whether to attend Roman's cousin's wedding as a couple. "It's too soon," Roman said. Daniel countered, "Waiting is what got us here." They compromised on going as friends but sitting together. The wedding itself became a turning point when Roman's aunt quietly pulled him aside and said, "You look happy. That's all that matters." Small victories, but they added up. Summer faded into fall, and the internal crisis deepened for both of them. Roman started therapy, real therapy, not the cash-paid sessions of the past, and came home one evening with a breakthrough. "I realized I've been punishing myself for loving you." Daniel listened as Roman described the years of shame he'd carried, the way he'd measured his worth by his parents' approval. They cried together that night, the kind of raw release that only comes after holding everything in too long. Daniel shared his own fears, the worry that Roman would eventually resent the complications their love brought. "I chose you every day," Roman whispered. "I just didn't know how to show it." Work pressure mounted when a major client pulled out after hearing rumors, citing values alignment. Roman spent 3 sleepless nights preparing a presentation to the partners, not begging to stay but outlining why the firm needed to evolve. He walked in with Daniel's latest photo, a sunrise over the lake, printed and framed as a reminder of what mattered. The partners listened, and while they didn't fire him, the tension remained. Daniel supported him by taking on extra shoots to cover bills, but the strain showed. One weekend they drove to Michigan for a quiet getaway, renting a small cottage where they could talk without the city noise. There, Roman made his biggest decision yet. He started drafting a resignation letter, planning to open a small practice helping LGBTQ+ clients with discrimination cases. "It's scary," he admitted, "but it feels right." Daniel kissed him under the stars. feeling the shift from fear to purpose. Back in Chicago, a misunderstanding nearly broke them. Daniel's friend Lena suggested a group trip to Pride, and Roman hesitated. "I support it, but I'm not ready for a parade." Daniel took it as rejection and spent the night on the couch. The next morning they talked it through, Roman explaining his need to come out on his own terms, Daniel apologizing for pushing. The reconciliation was tender, full of promises and quiet understanding. The real growth came when Roman attended a small support group for men in similar situations. He returned changed, more open, more himself. "They get it," he told Daniel. "The fear, the love, the fight." As winter approached, external pressure peaked. Roman's father called unexpectedly, asking to meet Daniel alone for coffee. The conversation was awkward but honest, the older man admitting his own prejudices stemmed from fear, not hate. "I just want my son to be happy." Daniel left the meeting with cautious hope, sharing every word with Roman that night. The sacrifice came when Roman finally submitted his resignation, trading stability for authenticity. Daniel stood by him at the farewell lunch, hand on his back, proud and a little terrified of what came next. Spring brought renewal. Roman's new practice opened in a modest office near Wicker Park, clients trickling in through word of mouth and Daniel's photography network. Their days filled with shared routines, morning coffee, evening walks, weekend drives. The family slowly warmed. Roman's mother sent a housewarming plant. Jake even texted a cautious, "Congrats on the new gig." Society's prejudice still lingered in sideways glances and occasional comments. But Roman and Daniel faced them together, stronger for every scar. One crisp Saturday, they returned to the suburban block party, this time invited openly. Daniel carried his camera, capturing moments of real connection. Roman laughing with his nieces, parents watching with quiet acceptance. When the sun set, they slipped behind the same garage, not hiding but simply enjoying the quiet. "Thank you for waiting," Roman whispered. Daniel smiled. "Thank you for choosing us." The journey had taken them through darkness and light, teaching them that love wasn't about perfection, but about the daily choice to show up. As they drove home under the city lights, Daniel realized the judge's ruling that morning months ago hadn't just freed him from a cell. It had freed them both to live fully. Their story wasn't over, but it was theirs, written in courage and quiet strength. True or false? One night of injustice is all it takes for a man to finally choose love over fear.